In 2021, France's president called Algeria's colonization a crime against humanity. In December 2025, Algeria's parliament passed a law making the same claim official, listing nuclear tests, extrajudicial killings, torture, and plunder as state crimes, and demanding an apology and reparations. Both governments at different points used almost the same words. Only one of them turned those words into law. France ruled Algeria for 132 years, from 1830 until Algeria's independence in 1962, governing it not as a colony, but formally as part of France itself, while systematically denying most Algerians the citizenship rights of the French settlers living alongside them. The war that ended that rule from 1954 to 1962 is one of the 20th century's defining independence struggles. The two sides don't agree on how many people died fighting it. Algeria's official figure is around 1.5 million. French historians' estimates run closer to 400 to 500,000, a gap of roughly 1 million lives, in a war that ended over 60 years ago. 1830, France invades and begins colonizing Algeria. 1945, French forces and settler militias kill thousands of Algerians after protests in Sétif turn violent, an event many historians treat as a direct precursor to the war. November 1, 1954, the National Liberation Front, the FLN, launches coordinated attacks across Algeria, beginning the war outright. 1956-57, the Battle of Algiers becomes the conflict's most infamous chapter, with FLN urban bombings met by French army use of torture and extrajudicial killings, later admitted to by French officers themselves. October 17, 1961, French police attack a peaceful Algerian protest in Paris. An unknown number, estimated at anywhere from dozens to over 200, are killed, some thrown into the Seine. March 1962, the Evian Accords end the war with a ceasefire. July 1962, Algeria becomes independent. Hundreds of thousands of Pied Noir settlers leave for France within months. 2012, French President François Hollande becomes the first head of state to officially recognize the October 17th massacre. 2021, Macron calls it an unforgivable crime, but stops short of a formal apology. December 2025, Algeria's parliament passes a law declaring French colonization a state crime. For Algeria, the War of Independence is inseparable from the 130 years that preceded it. A legal and social order, the indigénat code, that stripped most Algerians of political rights, land, and citizenship on their own soil, while French settlers held all three. In this frame, the war wasn't a rebellion against a foreign occupier, so much as the only route left open after over a century of a system with no legal path to change. Algeria's December 2025 law isn't presented as a new grievance. It's presented as finally writing into law what Algerians have said since 1962, that colonization itself, not just specific wartime atrocities, was the crime, and that a moral statement from a French president, however strongly worded, isn't the same as an apology with actual diplomatic and legal weight behind it. France's own president has gone further than any of his predecessors in naming what happened, calling colonization itself a crime against humanity in 2021, and the 1961 Paris massacre an unforgivable crime, language no French head of state had used before him. In this frame, that's real, hard-won acknowledgement, not evasion. What Macron has explicitly refused in his own words is a formal apology, describing his approach instead as a series of symbolic acts toward reconciliation rather than repentance. French officials' reasoning, though rarely stated as bluntly as this, is that a formal state apology carries legal and financial exposure to reparations claims to precedent for other former colonies, that a strongly worded moral statement does not. From this frame, France has said the hard thing already. What it hasn't done is accept the specific legal consequences that a different word would trigger. There are two mismatches stacked on top of each other here. The death toll itself is disputed by roughly 1 million people, a discrepancy this series has now seen before in a different form with Kosovo's recognition count. Even the basic scale of what happened isn't settled between the two governments most invested in settling it. The second mismatch is about language doing two different kinds of work: crime against humanity and unforgivable crime are extraordinarily strong words for a sitting head of state to use about his own country's history. But strong language costs a government very little by itself. An apology is a specific bounded speech act with legal and diplomatic consequences attached, which is exactly why France keeps reaching for the first kind of language and stopping short of the second. This series has spent several episodes now on the gap between what a government says and what it's actually willing to do about it. A landslide vote that didn't decide sovereignty, a legal record that a policy simply rejected. Algeria adds a specific version of that gap, the difference between admitting something happened and accepting the formal consequences of having done it. Maybe that's the addition here. Moral language is cheap for a government to spend, precisely because it doesn't obligate anything. The words that actually cost something, apology, reparations, formal responsibility, are the ones that keep not quite getting said, even by leaders willing to say almost everything else. A word used by both governments that only one turned into binding law, a death toll still disputed by roughly 1 million people, and an apology that a strongly worded crime against humanity still isn't. Next time, we go to Afghanistan, where a different superpower's 9-year war would end so badly it helped bring down the country that started it, and where the fighters it couldn't defeat would go on to shape the next 40 years of the region's history.